42 days. That is exactly how long Britain had left to live in 1943. Winston Churchill admitted, "The only thing that ever really frightened me was the U-boat peril. Not Rommel's tanks, not the Luftwaffe, but a few hundred steel tubes hidden beneath the Atlantic." Karl Dönitz had an equation. Sink 700,000 tons a month and victory is guaranteed. By February 1943, he was sinking 800,000. He was winning. Alan Turing, a mathematician from Cambridge, never held a gun in his life. But he killed more German submariners than all the Allied admirals combined. This is the story of a war where a calculator defeated a torpedo, and why the hero died at 41 while the war criminal lived to be 89. The Battle of the Atlantic, the War of Mathematicians. Great Britain is an island. In 1940, that seemingly obvious geographical fact became a death sentence. Half of all food and absolutely all oil arrived by sea. The ocean was not a shield, but the only lifeline. Cut these thin arteries of convoys, and the heart of the empire would stop in weeks. Factories would freeze, planes would be grounded, people would starve. Admiral Karl Dönitz understood this better than anyone in the German High Command. Unlike Hitler, who was obsessed with giant battleships like the Bismarck, Dönitz was a cold pragmatist. His strategy was not a heroic battle of fleets, but a cynical, industrial Tonnageskjagd, a tonnage war. The mission was purely economic: sink ships faster than the Allies could build them. His instrument for this surgical operation was the Type VII U-boat, the Gray Shark. It wasn't a wonder weapon. It was cramped, primitive, reeking of diesel, sweat, and fear. It lacked a snorkel and was slow underwater, but it was the perfect killing machine, cheap to produce, reliable, and most importantly, invisible to the sonars of that time. By day, they hid in the deep where they couldn't be touched, but at night they surfaced. British Aztec sonars were designed to look down into the water. They were utterly useless against an enemy that attacked from the surface, skimming across the waves under the cover of darkness like a torpedo boat. When losses became catastrophic, 5 ships a day, American industrial might entered the war. The Allies realized they couldn't hunt down every wolf in the vast ocean. So, they had to change the denominator in Dönitz's equation. The U.S. launched the Liberty Ships program. These were ugly, slow cargo vessels, scornfully called Kaiser's coffins by sailors. Their welded seams often cracked in cold water. But they had one decisive advantage. They were built not like ships, but like cars. Henry Kaiser introduced assembly line construction. Instead of slow riveting, fast welding. Ships were assembled from giant prefabricated sections all over the country. The result was staggering. Early in the war, building a ship took 200 days. By 1943, it took 2 weeks. The absolute record was set with the Robert E. Peary. From laying the keel to launch took 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. While the paint was still drying on the hull, tanks were already being loaded into the holds. For the first time in history, humanity was building ships faster than the enemy could load torpedo tubes. The equation began to shift. But Dönitz had an answer. He turned his fleet into a single, deadly organism. From his headquarters in occupied Paris, from the famous Hotel Carré, he controlled hundreds of boats by radio, moving them like pawns on a giant map of the Atlantic. He called it Rudeltaktik, the Wolfpack tactic. Previously, submarines hunted alone. Dönitz changed the rules. He arranged his boats in long picket lines across convoy routes. Dozens of submarines stretched over hundreds of miles. The moment one boat spotted smoke on the horizon, it was strictly forbidden to attack. Its job was to become a shadow. It would dive, trail the convoy, and send short radio signals, guiding the pack. In Paris, they received the signal and vectored every wolf in the sector toward the prey. The pack gathered for days. The attack would only begin when the numerical advantage was overwhelming. And always at night. And always from the surface. Imagine the terror of the merchant sailors. A dark night, the stormy Atlantic. And suddenly, simultaneously from all sides, right inside the convoy columns, 20 submarines surface. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Torpedoes were fired at point-blank range. Tankers flared up like matchsticks, lighting the ocean with burning oil, turning night into day. In this hell, there was no escape. The Germans' main weapon in those years wasn't the torpedo, but the radio. It was wireless communication that allowed Dönitz to coordinate these mass murders. But the irony of fate was that the radio would become their death sentence. By the spring of 1943, the Allies assembled a triad of technology designed to break the back of the wolf packs. The eyes, the brain, and the fist. The eyes, Huff-Duff, high-frequency direction finding. Engineers realized, to gather the pack, Germans had to talk on the radio. The new system allowed not just hearing the transmissions, but instantly triangulating their source. As soon as a U-boat went on air to report a convoy, it turned into a beacon. A dot lit up on the map, and destroyers raced there at full speed. The hunter became the hunted. The brain, Enigma. This was the war's most guarded secret. On May 9, 1941, British sailors achieved the impossible. Attacking U-110, they forced it to surface. The German crew panicked and abandoned ship, thinking it was sinking. But the boat didn't sink. A boarding party got inside. Knee-deep in freezing water, in the radio room, they found the Holy Grail. An intact, working Enigma machine, and more importantly, codebooks for months ahead. The Germans never found out. They were certain U-110 had gone to the bottom with all its secrets. At Bletchley Park, Alan Turing and his team used this find to crack the naval code once and for all. Now Churchill was reading Dönitz's orders before the U-boat commanders received them. Convoys simply steered around the ambushes, leaving the wolves howling at an empty ocean. The fist, Lee light, but even knowing where the boat was, it had to be destroyed. Night was no longer a shield. Liberator patrol planes were fitted with centimetric radar and powerful Lee light searchlights. Imagine, you are on watch on a German U-boat. Night, silence, instruments are quiet, you feel safe. And suddenly, a flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns, 22 million candle power, hits you right in the eyes. You are blinded. Through the roar of engines, you realize the plane is already on top of you. You have 18 seconds before the depth charges drop. To crash dive, the boat needs 35 seconds. It was an execution. In Black May 1943, Dönitz lost 41 U-boats. His own son, Peter Dönitz, died on one of them. The admiral realized he had lost. He ordered the boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic. The battle was over. But Germany had one last ace. A weapon that could have nullified all Allied technology if it had appeared 6 months earlier. The Type 21 U-boat. The Electroboot. It was an engineering masterpiece. The world's first true submarine. All previous subs were essentially surface ships that could dip underwater briefly. The Type 21 was built to live submerged. A streamlined hull with no deck guns. Giant batteries taking up a third of the hold. Old boats crawled underwater at 6 knots. This one did 17. It was faster than the corvettes hunting it. It had a hydraulic rapid reload system for torpedoes, and a snorkel, allowing diesels to run while submerged. Its hull was coated in rubber, the Alberich compound, which absorbed sound waves. It was invisible to sonar. Stealth technology in 1945. On May 4, 1945, one such boat, U-2511, commanded by Ace Adalbert Schnee, encountered the British cruiser Norfolk. Schnee slipped easily through the destroyer screen. No one heard him. He reached the perfect firing position. The cruiser was a sitting duck. It was the triumph of German engineering, but the captain didn't pull the trigger. Hours earlier, he had received a radio order, cease fire, surrender. He simply simulated the attack, passed under the cruiser's keel, and headed for base. The wonder weapon was exactly 48 hours too late. Logistics had won over technology again. The bombed-out factories of the Reich simply couldn't build enough of these machines in time. After Hitler's suicide, it was Karl Dönitz who became the last Führer of the Third Reich. He ruled for only 23 days. Realizing the war was lost, he used the remnants of his fleet not for killing, but for saving. Operation Hannibal, the largest naval evacuation in history. Under fire from Soviet aircraft and ships, his vessels rescued 2 million refugees and soldiers from East Prussia. At Nuremberg, Dönitz was tried as a war criminal. He faced the gallows for unrestricted submarine warfare, but he was saved by the enemy. American Admiral Chester Nimitz submitted an affidavit. The U.S. waged exactly the same kind of war in the Pacific. We also sank everything that moved. Dönitz received 10 years. He was released, wrote his memoirs, and died in 1980 at the age of 89, a respected elder in military circles. Alan Turing, the man who cracked Enigma and shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving millions of lives, received nothing. In 1952, he was charged with gross indecency for homosexuality. He was given a choice: prison or chemical castration. To continue his work, he chose hormonal therapy. It broke his body and his mind. On June 7, 1954, Alan Turing was found dead. Next to him lay a half-eaten apple laced with cyanide. He was only 41. The ocean knows how to keep secrets, but sometimes history repays its debts too late.